What I love that you're doing at Acres is you're taking a lot of that and saying, okay, well, now here's a market. You can access the market, right? Like you're effectively a tiny NASDAQ of information. Thank you for tuning in to today's Land and Everything Else podcast. Craig Lemoyne here with Carter Malloy again. Carter, we loved having you when we first started out. I really appreciate that conversation to get us going. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Excited.
So Carter is the CEO of Acres, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about what Acres is and the platform and what it brings to the world around us. I find it fascinating.
Well, thank you. Put simply, it is a map-based land intelligence platform. So we bring forth data and mapping for folks interested in land or involved in land. That can be owning land to farming land to using land, hunting on land, buying and selling, any of that type of part of the world. Our job is to help bring transparency and understanding.
So to that end, we talk a lot on Land and Everything Else about land as an investment. And one of the concepts we've kind of been getting to lately is, one of the differences between a security, let's say any publicly traded stock, and a land investment is that I can check on my phone over and over and over again, right, the value of that security. And as long as the markets are open, and heck, even when they're closed, there's some value that's put into place there. And I think land, has that different perspective that we don't always know what it's worth. And I kind of like to get your thoughts on that. And I'm going to tie Acres into that conversation in just a minute.
Yeah. So generally speaking, it's part of the reason I got into this industry. My dad's in farming. I grew up around this. And if you ask him at any point in time, what's your land worth? He's got a pretty good sense, plus or minus about 30%. And, you ask him what his stock portfolio worth is, and he knows it down to the penny at any moment of the day. So exactly what you just suggested there is, here's this multi-trillion-dollar asset, like the physically largest asset in the United States, with very little to no transparency. And as is the case in the world of stock markets or any other market, in the world of capital markets, that information, the ability to access data about your investments, helps that market function more appropriately.
So to that end, a lot of our audience is financial advisors, wealth managers, insurance agents, people that are that financial intermediary to clients and to wealth, and also have wealth themselves. Let's say that I've got a client and they're thinking, man, maybe this apartment complex is interesting. Maybe there's some land by the house, and I was in the bank and I saw this kind of for sale, for auction thing. Walk me through where Acres helps me make a wiser decision in those types of conversations.
Generally speaking, if you're evaluating a piece of land, it's very difficult to find that information, right? If you want to evaluate a stock, there's 100 places to go.
Sure.
Bloomberg is probably the most easy example of that. If you want to look at a house, we got Zillow, we got Realtor.com, we got Homes, lots of options for information about that. The same is not true in our world of land. So Acres, which just lives at acres.com, is very simply a place, whether that's a mobile application, you want to use our mobile app, or our website, to go find that data. So first of all, how big is this parcel? Who owns it? What's the information about this at the assessor's office? What are comparable sales in this area going for? And that's a good example of one of our data sets where we have the deepest and most recent data set of comparable sales for rural land that there is in the United States. And we do that across the various data sets that we help surface on there. Is this in a flood zone? What's the topography of this like? If you're growing things on there, what are you growing and how well are they growing? So again, it's just all to get a sense, really, an understanding of that land and help value that land. And you can, of course, then begin building your own maps and drawing and really taking it to the next level should you want to dig in further.
So is Acres primarily, we're talking row crops, corn and beans, or are we looking at other types of land investments that I might be able to make as well?
Basically anything over 1 acre.
Okay.
So we're looking at any type of land. We got our start in farming. We were farm kids probably first and foremost. And so there's quite a bit of a strong agricultural use case in there. But generally speaking, if you're looking at land, we will have some valuable information for just about anybody.
So we're talking there's a winery, kind of like grape sort of stuff, or what are we? Would that be included too?
If you're looking at development land or wineries or timber or a ranch, just some recreational ground to go play on, we will have information about any of that type of land.
Oh, well, that's cool. I really like that idea, and I love the versatility of all of it too. I'd like to kind of take the conversation and pivot with you just a little bit. When we look at institutional land purchases and we're starting to look at maybe more family office and wealth management, and we're starting to see those interest in alternative asset classes trickle down to more consumer portfolios than 30 years ago, I think we're starting to see a real case for why I would want to have land or real estate in a portfolio alongside stocks and bonds. Maybe that case is a lot louder today than it was a few decades past. Can you walk me through or have a conversation with me about some starting points of where a affluent consumer or somebody in that space may say, okay, I want to start adding this kind of thing to my portfolio? I mean, do I go onto Acres and start looking around, or what kind of steps and vetting would that person go through in your eyes?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We're there to provide that person information. I think as you're well aware, and I'm sure many of the listeners are here today, we got our start building the business of AcreTrader, and it's a farmland investing platform specific to farmland and timberland, where we help investors gain access and grow their portfolio, and likewise help farmers raise capital to invest in their business. So we actually got here from that place you speak of, right? Of helping to democratize investing and helping farmers raise capital along the way there. So that's a lot of our core customers who you speak to there. Along the way, we built Acres actually because we needed it as a team out evaluating land for purchase, for investment, for disposition, for management. And as we built this tool, we thought, you know what, let's put this online and see if others can find use to it. It's a big part of who we are. We are really big believers in transparency and openness. And ultimately, I guess the truth is the best way to put that. And so we put this tool online, and we have been pretty blown away in terms of the number of use cases, the user feedback we've gotten, and just the number of users using this tool every single day.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking it from the standpoint of the wealth manager, financial advisor, is that there's a huge use case to be made, especially if you're looking in the world of starting to introduce alternative assets through the form of land or timber or whatever it is into client portfolios. I can see where being able to provide that client information, being on the right side of the table, being on the same team as that client goes a really long way towards helping build that relationship and transparency. So, I mean, I think that is really awesome to see those use cases. And I would imagine the use cases are direct consumers thinking about buying all the way up to institutions. So I was wondering if you could share, what type of usage are you seeing on that platform? Are you seeing like state pension funds jump on? Like what kind of world is been created here, taking the private market, and while it still is a private market, you've sort of created a lot more transparency and public around that private market.
Yeah, I would say our use cases span from the most intense enterprises, so financial institutions are a good example, but plenty of other industries as well, where large numbers of users coming in and using the tool, and they're in their day-to-day operations, all the way down to an individual consumer that just wants a basic view, right? And so the use cases are aplenty. Our job is to provide great foundational data and great tools to explore that data. So in the use case you mentioned as an example for a wealth manager, they can also help their clients map their portfolio. Many of their clients will already own land, will already own farmland, or maybe are looking at buying some to your use case. We are here to help them map that out, or they may not know. You can put in your client's name and immediately see all the land that they own and or any entity in the United States that's owned inside of our software.
So when you started out with the idea of sort of unveiling, I guess would be the word I would use, sort of uncloaking, when you started with that mission and vision, was there kind of one overriding kind of information or data you wanted to provide? Have you built over time, or was the initial idea to have, everything from tax to history to crop to flood to, was there sort of a vision of stacking it, or was it an all at once idea?
I think the general concept was just born out of helping people understand and value land and giving them confidence in that process. And so out of the gate, we certainly did understand that we wanted to put multiple layers in there, provide additional information on a per parcel basis or per map basis. So that was always the intention, was to have lots of data layers and also to have some mapping capabilities in there. I would say that the depth of both of those, both your ability to do mapping and custom mapping and share that stuff, create reports, as well as the depth of the data, has grown sincerely exponentially. I can be specific. It is July of 2024. Since the beginning of this year, the functionality of our software has roughly doubled. The
Wow.
actual amount of actual data in our software has tripled since the beginning of this year.
That's amazing. And where does it go from here? What else would you in a dream state add, or are you able to share of anything that's currently in process?
Yeah, I think one, we want to keep doing that, right? I think a core focus continues to be foundational data sets, right? So the application layer is important for having an easy interface, very, very simple interface where my dad, who's 89, is a farmer, can use it, as well as the most tech savvy person out there. So a simple interface, we will continue to invest heavily in making that performant. So very easy, very fast. And then we'll continue to build novel data sets and derivative data.
I love the idea of acres as the Bloomberg of land. I think you mentioned it earlier, and I think it's so critical. One of the things we talked about with guests on the show is this idea of like private credit and the risk of private credit, right? Is that I have to, yes, I can't commit fraud, right? I have to be forthright and Reg D and give you information, but still it's very one-sided, right? It's like, okay, I know that there's this issue that this issuer issued a security, and the security is a private note, and I think they're going to pay me back, and they promised me X%. But there's so much one-sidedness to that. And what I love that you're doing at Acres is you're taking a lot of that and saying, okay, well, now here's a market. You can access the market, right? Like you're effectively a tiny NASDAQ of information. And I really love that. Have you seen like price shifts and things start to happen yet? Because I feel like as information is more transparent, that inevitably is going to occur.
So the easy answer to that is no, we haven't yet. In fact, there's a growing disparity in price, I guess, or deviation in price outcomes in places like the Midwest, where frankly just some red hot markets have cooled. We do publish macro research on things like that. So we show a lot of that macro data. So you can go download, for example, the Heartland report on our website for free today to get access to our bottom up build of comparable sales to show you trends through the first quarter of this year happening in the Midwest, as an example, on a state by state and crop reporting district by CRD standpoint. So we put a lot of that information out there, but all that to say is not yet. I think the amount of information, the information asymmetry is still very, very wide. And look, this idea of building the Bloomberg of land, like it is also self-interested, right? We are a for-profit company, and sure, we firmly believe that a more functioning market, a healthier market that leads to better outcomes for buyers and sellers, helps drive more market growth and helps drive our business as well. So,
I think it does. I think when you started with AcreTrader, right, that made investing in land less scary, because now I'm coming up with 50,000 or 100,000 instead of maybe 2 or 5 million that I may need to make a direct land purchase. And it's less scary, right? That 20 or 50,000. Now I have a position, but it's less scary. I think this is that same theme, is this idea of saying, okay, let's make it more accessible. Let's make it more transparent. And now I can make that land purchase decision, but now I have an awful lot more facts than I did 20 years ago.
Well said. At the end of the day, like things don't have to be that hard. And that's a big goal of ours, is if we can make things less daunting and easier for folks, then one, it's good for them, and two, it can be good for our business as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And I think that's why I love the idea so much, right? Is this idea of like, okay, maybe you don't need $7 million to buy into real estate. Yeah, maybe we can do it with 50. And maybe you can get a piece of direct ownership as opposed to a REIT, right? Which direct ownership works different than a REIT to that end. And now you've got this idea of like, all right, I was driving and there was this farmhouse and it had a for sale sign and it had an auction date. And let me look into that. And now I can actually click and I can go to Acres and I can find out so much more than having to call the realtor and just get the highlights.
That's exactly right. I said it can be good also, but you've got to be able to do research to dig in. And that's a big part of what we're trying to accomplish with Acres. It's just providing more data.
And by no means, I think data makes markets more transparent. I mean, you still have buyers and sellers. You know, at the end of the day, you still have appreciation, depreciation. You can't control. No one knows what the future holds for valuation. Right. And there's none of those things are fixed. But I think giving more data to both buyers and sellers makes the market easier. I think makes transactions perhaps more fluid. And I think that type of thing does, if we have the same conversation in 2030, I think you may actually see some market transformation from it.
That is our hope, to help achieve positive market transformation, to make sure we're clear, right? Like this is a good thing.
Positive,
more
liquidity,
transparency is positive.
More fair. I think more data means more transparency, and I think more transparent transactions. Certainly, you still have a big demand in certain areas of real estate and farmland. Interest rate rising has tempered that to some extent, but I still think you do have a finite amount of farmland in the United States, and and more people interested in it. So that's my take on that. But I love the idea of here we have Bloomberg, the Morning Star of what typically was somewhat of a private market, and maybe you could go look at the last time it traded hands. Maybe you could look at the property tax value. But the idea now that you can look at it from 18, 20 different perspectives, right, of seeing all this together is really powerful. And I think useful from consumer standpoint, wealth manager standpoints, to family office standpoints. And I really think I would encourage our listener base to go check it out, because I think there's huge value to be had in the space. And how would somebody check it out? Just go to acres.com, or is there other ways to play around?
That's it. So acres.com or our application, which is in the both app stores, and you can get started for free. So we put some great tools in there, things like ability to go explore parcels, the ability to go build your own maps. You can do a lot of that for free right out of the gate, and it's super easy to use. So I'd encourage you to go check it out.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again today. And, I've really loved this conversation with you. And I tell you what, I really hope that our listener base goes and checks it out, because, one of the criticisms we often get in alts is a lot about private markets, and private markets transparency can be detrimental, right? Information asymmetry is a powerful thing to have. If I have more information than you, I can usually get a better deal or take advantage or something to that extent. So it's nice to see that information sort of being less focused and more spread. And I think fundamentally you're looking at some market shift and change here. So I wanted to thank you for that. And, all you're doing in that end to make it more accessible to everybody.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carter. It was great to talk with you.
Likewise, as always.